Hello, heathens. Welcome to yet another episode. As always, I say this every time, but every time I feel this way, I am super excited to have my guest with me today, Dr. Alexiana Fry. Thank you so much for being on here with me. I am so excited because honestly, I think you might be the first female scholar I've interviewed. And it's not for lack of trying.
I understand.
I actually had the privilege of running across Dr. Fry, Alexiana, on Twitter when I sort of naively put up this post saying like, hey, do you want to talk to me about your research? Thinking that I would get a couple of hits. And as we're all aware at this point, it went quickly off the rails in the best way possible. But when I saw what she was researching, when I saw what you were researching, I got really excited, which sounds strange because I'm going to say what you research is like women and trauma in the Hebrew Bible.
Yes.
But I think if you're a woman or a female identifying person, and you've read the Hebrew Bible or really any of the Bible, you have probably too felt a bit strange about the way women exist or are framed or are presented or are treated even. And so thinking about them, their lives, their experiences, and the trauma around those things is really fascinating, especially considering most of us probably have some trauma today. But before I get too far down that path, I would like to can I call you Alexiana? Do you prefer Dr. Fry?
Oh yeah, that's totally fine. You do not need to call me Dr. Fry. I'm still not used to it either, so it's sort of feeling a little weird.
That's okay, I'll stop. But if you need me to pick it up again.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I would like to cede the floor here to Alexiana, and have you tell me a little bit more about sort of your upbringing, if you would like, what led you to your studies, and really anything else kind of about yourself that you'd like to share with me, with the people.
Love it. Thank you so much for having me, all of my fellow heathens. Yeah, I'm an interesting character.
That's how we get along.
DMing you and just saying, hey, do you want to talk about trauma, as just the straight up intro.
Yeah, I mean, that's effectively all I talk about, so.
Yeah, it's the same. But normally when you sort of lead with that, especially in the realm I'm in, it's sort of like, yeah, no.
No, thank you.
Especially the core text my dissertation was on was both Judges 19, which, again, I think maybe just a big giant trigger warning over everything.
Yeah, fair enough.
Say. But if you don't know Judges 19, it's not surprising that you don't know about it, along with many other texts that have been sanitized in liturgies and etc. But it's in there. It is a text where a woman is gang raped and dismembered. By two separate parties, gang raped by strangers and dismembered by her own spouse, who is a Levite. There's much more there. But
you know what's interesting is that, like, even growing up evangelical, I had heard that story, and like, I just kind of thought, yeah, that sucks, but I must be missing something. Like, I must be missing something. It turns out I was not.
You were not. The text is very famous, or infamous, right? And a lot of even commentaries I was reading, because the text starts off with a woman left her husband. She was, the word is zonah in Hebrew, and that's a nice famous word for prostituting, whoring. But you can also be unfaithful to your spouse in the patriarchal society simply by leaving him. However, and just to point this out, and simply because the wonderful author Isabel Hamley pointed this out for me, I will not say that I got there on my own. Due to my own conditioning, growing up, it was always, if I did hear the text, it was, well, she deserved it. Like, she got the punishment that was due her because she was unfaithful. So a lot of even feminist writers like to make it like, no, she wasn't unfaithful. Like, don't worry. She just left, which kind of means, like, in other circumstances, like the LXX, the Septuagint says she was angry with him. So he could have been doing X, Y, and Z. We don't know if this was an abusive situation. Clearly, there is some DV involved at the end. But no matter what she did, she didn't deserve to get gang raped and dismembered.
Right. This like outsized punishment is so wild to me, and that Christians largely just accept it. And you see this not just here. I mean, think about like the concept of hell, right? Outsized, wildly outsized punishment. But on a smaller scale, on more like individual here, it's like, okay, say she was unfaithful. Say she did get angry. Say she left for any reason in the world. Do you think that then gang rape is an appropriate response to that? And if you do, stay fucking 30 feet away from me. Like, yeah,
we're good. We're good.
I've had enough.
And I've talked about this before because I do compare her in my dissertation to Gomer, which is another figure that growing up I was like, oh my gosh, Gomer's so horrible. She's the worst. You know, she's the sex worker, and we all know what evangelicals think about sex work.
Do we?
And she deserves what is coming to her. And even in, I think it's Hosea 2 or Hosea 3. It's Hosea 2. It's that beautiful, like, he's wooing her. He's coming back. He's just literally showed her genitals to people. And publicly berating her, essentially.
Rather not.
Hosea is doing this. In the name of
prophet.
Yahweh. Yes. In the name of God. And then woos her back. Like, don't worry. I love you still. It's a very common picture of what happens in abusive relationships.
Right. Yeah.
And so in comparing even the nameless concubine who was gang raped and dismembered to this Gomer figure, it's this essence of this big question of, did she really deserve what came to her? And when I discuss this, when it comes to this lens of trauma, right? On one level, there are some, there's some decently like ethical things that we need to talk about, right? Say Gomer and the nameless concubine aren't real. Say they're fictitious.
Right.
Some people would say they're fictitious and therefore it's fine. Like, what's happening, the text is a picture of what's happening between Israel and Yahweh. So it's fine. Like, we don't have to worry about the treatment of women in the text.
But then why is it a woman? Right? Then why is it a woman? Why couldn't it be somebody else?
There's another researcher. Her name is Nancy Nam Hoon Tan, and she's from Hong Kong, I want to say. But she does research with the Book of Hosea and sex workers, and she reads this book to them and gets their responses. It's wonderful. Really, really beautiful book, as in also horrible.
Right.
But even the sex workers were like, if they wanted to get a message across to Israel, why wouldn't they use a patriarchal husband as this unfaithful figure? Like, that seems a little bit more effective than feminizing a character. But as we know, you know, the worst thing to be in a patriarchal culture is a woman. So, like, to call somebody a woman.
Oh, boy, do I say this every day.
That really hits the message that they were trying to get. And so on one level, so we have these fictional characters. Some people are like, who cares, even though it's pornographic and horrible, and
it's fine. Don't worry about it.
All the things. You know, Israel got what was coming to them based on the covenant. Well, self-blame is a very effective way to make it through trauma in some way.
I mean, yeah, I think anyone that's gone through childhood trauma probably realizes that.
It's the easiest way out. It's the easiest way out because
like, must be my fault because then I can fix it somehow.
Control is yourself, right?
Right.
The only thing you can control is yourself in those situations, and so if you can blame it on yourself, it's much easier to almost cope. On another level, if the text is depicting very explicitly a trauma, and they're watching as these women are being violated in many ways, to the point of death, then we have a picture where we're asking the question, are these books actually telling us a story about how they are actually shaking their fist at Yahweh and going, we do not deserve this treatment. It doesn't matter what happened. You're treating us really poorly. And this is not the relationship we signed up for either. Right. And so it creates a lot of nuance. Trauma does, as we all know. It also is, trauma is very narrowing, but it's also like, with the time collapse, with everything that comes with it, there's so many variables. I mean, now that trauma is being researched even further, we've got, I think back when I was young, it was just fight or flight.
Yeah.
And now we've got fight, flight, freeze, flop, and fawn.
Yeah. Yeah.
My joke is that the last F should be fluid because trauma is fluid. It moves in so many ways that we really, it's just interesting that as a former evangelical who really likes things to be pinned down, really likes things to have a specific answer, that I chose to work with trauma because there's no right answer. There's hardly ever an answer, which is difficult to work with in a research context, but it's also so thrilling. So all that said, I just talked for quite some time about my dissertation. That is my work.
If you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about your upbringing in the evangelical church and then what brought you to academia, sort of that path for you, because I think people would be interested in hearing.
Yes. I grew up in what I can now call very white Christian nationalist congregations and churches. And again, like now that I am out of it, and so is my mother and my father. My mom even is like, I thought I was doing what was right.
Of course.
Which is just awful, to reckon with. We spent every waking moment in that building. I know that feel. What is interesting too is, watching as my mom was creating curriculum for Sunday school and just crushing it in all of these realms. And yet, if my dad wasn't the head of the home, what is my mom doing? She's out of place. And I'm literally watching these power struggles as a kid going why? My mom's using
she
her
knows
gifts.
More.
She's using her gifts. My dad's using his. Sorry, hers are more public. I don't know what to. What's the big deal here? Anyway, but coming out of that, my parents divorced. There was some real messiness when it came to the way the church responded and the way.
If you don't mind me asking, what denomination were you?
Baptist at that time. And then what I didn't know is then when we moved, I went to a Southern Baptist church, which ironically, the Southern Baptist church was the one that was like, no, you really need to stick through this divorce. And my mom thought that was not okay. But again, self-blame is easier. Holding on is
see
easier.
The divorce through or not divorce?
Yeah, they were like, you need to see the divorce through. It's not.
Got it. Okay.
It's not good. But Yeah, just very, when we're at Awana, we're pledging allegiance to the Christian flag and also to the United States. And,
Oh my Lord. I had forgotten.
so young, not knowing, it's just interesting dredging all that up now. But especially these pieces where it was like, I'm a very vivacious, loud human being. And I also happen to be female. And that did not coexist very well. I even remember there were a few times a Awana leader was like, I see all of your energy. I'm going to need you to bottle it up. I'm going to need you to bottle it up. And then in another aspect, I remember being at a purity conference, and they gave us all, and I'm like 9, and myself, and they gave us all these tiny little pearls to hold on to, like symbolizing, and of course I lost it. So it's just, there's so
and
much.
The world didn't end? Oh my God.
Well, my social world.
Yeah.
But not really. Yeah, I grew up deep in white evangelicalism. Went to, when we moved, I ended up going and attending a Christian high school as well, which is a whole nother layer of mess.
I don't know if you're familiar, but for 3 years of my schooling, I did ACE or PACE, Accelerated Christian Education, which are these workbooks. And you like sit by yourself and do your little workbooks. And they were created by like some Baptists in the 1970s in Texas. So you're not getting like high level education here. And I say this all the time, but you'll find it amusing. In my science workbook, the evidence that they had that evolution was false was that the Loch Ness Monster existed.
No.
So, I swear to God. It's in the New York Times or something. There was a whole article about like, what the fuck are these people doing? And I was like, oh, I went there. The scary part is that like lots of people went through this. And so like,
yes.
Yeah, it's anyway. So yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. Yep. That was, for I was about to say for better or for worse, but
definitely for worse.
Yeah. So coming out of that and then attending a Christian college, but while I was at this Christian college, just for the first time, so I've just shared with you that for 18 years of my life, I'm born and raised, baptized at the age of 7 in this church. And for the first time ever, I'm given tools to learn how to read this ancient text in college.
Right.
Which is
because I assume
really
that
sad,
much like me. Sorry, I was going to say I assume that much like my upbringing, the pastor or whoever sort of told you what the Bible said, and then you read it, and you just read what they said into it because that's how you were taught to do it. You were never given these tools of like, here's like, I mean, obviously not everyone can teach you ancient languages, but like, they don't introduce textual criticism. Like, there's nothing in any way except for this is the pastor, this is what I think, this is what it means. And they don't even say this is what I think. They just tell you this is what it means.
This is what it says.
Exactly. And then when you read it, even in your like devotionals or quiet times or whatever, like you feel like whatever they said has gotten in here. And so that's it. That's just what it means. We're not doing any critical thought here. Not worrying about it. I already know what it means.
Because I was taught never to question authority unless it was certain authorities, right?
Just outside of the church. Yeah.
And, don't question cops, but do question a democratic president. You know what I mean? Like, there are certain authorities that are from Satan. But
I mean, if people can't if you spend any amount of time in the evangelical church, it is obvious that they have an authoritarian bent. And it's not just authoritarian in the sense that like they want you to listen to them and them only. It is like Christian nationalist authoritarianism. You listen exactly to the cops. They're always right. You will listen to the president if he's a Republican. And the thing is, I would bet dollars to donuts. You could go to 50 different evangelical churches. No one from the pulpit is going to be speaking anything that tells you you should be voting for a Democrat. Now, technically, they're not supposed to be saying anything from the pulpit that tells you to, exactly for tax purposes, that tells you who to vote for. But you will get very clear messaging from church leaders, elders, and the people around you on who you should be voting for.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I digress.
It's very clear.
Yeah.
But not, right? But also very clear. Actually, fun fact, when I was working at a complementarian church in a women's ministry role, because...
Of course, that's it. That's all you can do.
Yeah, God forbid. Anyway, we could talk all day.
Yeah, I hear. I really hear you.
I did get in a little bit of trouble because I had posted something once Trump was elected about how the church needs to care for these people who are going to be affected by these negative policies.
How dare you?
And I knew I had a world. I was walking into a world where everybody next to me had voted for Trump. And so I posted this, also using very tamped down language.
Of course.
Because I want to keep my job, right? And it was still don't be divisive.
I genuinely, and I've said this a million times, I know everybody thinks this. I mean, not everybody, but everyone that I kind of interact with at this point. Even though I grew up in this environment, that it makes perfect sense to me why these people banded together and voted for Trump. It really does. It also boggles my mind at the same time that these same people can sit there and say here are biblical morals and ethics that we should all be following, and yet I am going to vote for this sexual predator who has absolutely no backbone, only cares about money. How the mental gymnastics are
the
Simone
mental
Biles
gymnastics,
levels.
The massive cognitive dissonance.
Yeah,
I personally couldn't do it.
I mean, I was out of the church by then, fortunately for me. And so by that point, I was raging against the evangelicals.
Oh, yeah.
The person you see today has toned it down, which is saying something about how I was pissed. I mean, because
rightfully so.
Right. But at the time, I was trying to take the more educational route. Here's how this is actually bad. And here's exactly. But it doesn't work. And so 5-10 years after the fact, this is who you get, because I'm realizing that it actually doesn't work. And what you have to do is shout those people down, stop giving them platforms, make them feel bad, and try and shove them away because they don't want to learn. They don't want to learn. They want power.
They want power. And they're really not, I forget what the term is, but as soon as it doesn't really matter. They're not interested in being curious or having a reciprocal conversation in any sort of way, even though they say, let's have a conversation, right?
No.
This is not a mutual discussion. This is going to be me.
They don't want to learn. They want to be right. And so they are not listening to anything you have to say with any degree of goodwill.
Yes.
Instead, it's just waiting for you to finish. Yeah, good faith. There it is. They're waiting for you to finish so they can tell you why they're right. And I actually have no, people ask me why I don't do debates, and it's because I have no interest in talking with someone who has an a priori commitment to something and is not going to take anything that I have to say into consideration, and it's going to be incredibly adversarial. If you want to be adversarial, let's do it. But you're not going to like the outcome because we're not going to have a debate. I'm going to tell you about yourself. But when we treat, in my opinion, some of these ideas like they're equal. Like, let's debate,
Right.
because your opinion and thoughts on people's identities is as valid as, like, you know, their actual identities. Like, that's a problem, and, like, we're not going to do that.
There was a meme going around during the election, which, yeah, I won't say a ton, but, like, it's that conversation of, like, who are you voting for? And it's like, one is a Krispy Kreme donut. It's not the best, but it'll do.
Yeah.
And then the other is a literal Nazi. And they're like,
Hard choice. Yeah.
And you're like, these are not the same.
Right. It's like, would you like a Krispy Kreme donut or, like, a flaming bag of dog shit? I don't know. They're not the same, though. And, like, that's also what kind of blows my mind, like, now when people are, like, when they, like, shit on Biden and then, like, expect me to get offended. I don't think Biden's that great.
No, he's not great.
I voted for him.
He's not doing what I wanted him to do.
Because he was a better option than Donald Trump. That was it.
Yes.
I would have voted for a fucking rock at this point. Like, anything. Like, literally anything outside of somebody worse than Trump, which exists, but it's hard to imagine.
Very true.
But, like, I also am like, yeah, he wasn't, that's not how politics works. You don't get someone who gives you everything you want. You take these slow incremental steps by picking the, like, marginally better candidate. Now, I think Biden was more than marginally better, but that doesn't mean that I think that he is, like, some, like, savior.
He wasn't my first choice. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. I don't even know if he was my second choice, to be honest.
No,
but he was the best choice I was offered.
Yeah,
like,
there you go.
That's it.
Yep.
Anyway, sorry.
Yep. No, I'm with you.
When people are like, fuck Joe Biden, I'm like, yeah, kinda. Like, kinda.
But for what reason?
Exactly. Well, gas prices, obviously. So as someone, can't remember if I told you this or not. I literally majored in economics. So when people say that, I'm like, oh, sweetie baby honey pie. Like, how do you, okay, all right. Someone go put on PBS for this child, because, like, it's just, I don't even know how to begin to engage with folks when they're like, when that's the sort of level of their thinking, because it's just so wrong.
My favorite is when people are like, yeah, but gas prices in 2020 were like $2.
Yeah.
Huh. Why is that?
Yeah. Have you heard of the war in Ukraine by any chance? Do you have any idea what happens over there? Have you heard of, like, OPEC, like the oil crisis? Like, have you heard of any of these things? No, you haven't. Okay.
No, it's just Joe Biden's fault.
Yep, totally. And that's why gas prices are high everywhere in the world.
Title 42 is still happening? Yes. It is
Obviously.
still Joe Biden's fault about Title 42. And we're talking the dragging of the feet on student debt. But gas prices?
Yeah. I mean, listen, no president ever, including Donald Trump, had power over gas prices. That's not how that works.
Not how that works.
And listen, I would blame anything I could on Donald Trump because I hate that man. But, like, actually, if I blamed gas prices on him, I'd just be a fucking idiot. So, like, it's like, there are things that you can blame the president for, and there are things that you cannot.
Sure.
Anyway, I'm sorry. This has gotten way off topic, but
it's fine.
It's makes me furious.
We're going organic. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. Let me reel myself in a little bit. So you went to a Christian college.
Yep. That was when I first learned how to sort of read my Bible. At that point, I was going to school for a worship arts degree. And let's just put it clearly, I wanted to be the hot singer up front with the breathy voice. Yeah.
Who's, like, praising the Lord, but then knows everyone is, like, looking at her and, like...
Yes, exactly that. But, you know, it was sanctified at that point when I came in originally, so...
Super holy.
It's fine. I was very holy. What instead happened was, because I'm in worship arts, I have to take these Bible classes, and I'm like, so boring. I fall in love with it. I start to be introduced to commentaries. Start to be introduced to this world of oh my gosh, there are like differing opinions on what's going on in here, and they're acceptable. And of course, I'm still at a Christian college, so I just went from extremely narrow to slightly less narrow.
Right, yeah.
And anything outside of the slightly less narrow, like I had said before, be careful. Be careful.
The devil will lead you astray.
The
with
devil
any kind
will
of
lead you astray.
liberal drift you might engage in.
Yeah, don't worry. Before I went to seminary, I made sure to read the book How to Stay Christian in Seminary by John Piper. Don't you worry.
Oh, God.
I did. I was very concerned.
Oh, God,
What instead happened, then attended Westminster in Philadelphia. I was like one of 3 women in the MDiv program. So when I had to take the mandatory preaching class for an MDiv,
right,
I was not allowed to preach up front. I had to write out my sermon, and then I was just graded on a written portion, which on one level, from my slacker side of things, I was like,
dude.
cool, I don't care.
As an introvert, I would have been like, awesome.
Yeah, I'm like,
but like,
great.
Yeah.
But on another level, it was like, so everybody in this class but me
is allowed to be heard from.
Because I might, what?
Oh no, because
am I
going to
say another gospel?
That's all. No. Yeah. That's... and I like to say it that way because it makes people really, really uncomfortable.
It's actually,
and that's the truth.
There's a podcast called Truth's Table, which, and they actually talked about how, so if I had like a penis-shaped microphone, would that make it like, because then it's coming through.
Right. Yeah. Hey.
Yeah. Phallic. Anyway, so attended there, then finished up back here at in Grand Rapids at just a local theological seminary after we moved back from Philly. And it was there that I started to have, I went from Christian school to then Westminster, which actually narrowed me in a little bit more, back out. And then I was even told when I had moved back, like, be careful about certain professors. You just don't know.
Yeah, you just don't know.
Yep, now I'm a heretic, so it's fine.
Yeah. So when you got your MDiv, like when you graduated, were you still sort of like fully faithful? I hate that word, but like fully invested in the church, or like where were you on this sort of like deconstruction road, which you might not have known then? Maybe you did, but
to be honest, and this is both horrible and great. I don't love the fact that I was not a good person. But really, Donald Trump as a candidate coming onto the scene really started it for me.
I like to remind people that like we were doing the best we could with what we had, and we were also victims. Does that absolve us from everything? No, of course not. No. But it allows us some compassion with ourselves that like, it's not like we knew better and then decided to do it anyway. It's like we had also been indoctrinated and victimized in a lot of ways.
Actually interesting because when I some of the work I do in trauma, there's another aspect of trauma called moral injury. And a lot of people who are in the army or in the military experience that, they kill someone for the first time. And
right.
It's this aspect of like, this doesn't fit with the ideologies that I actually have in here. And yet I'm being affected by the very things I'm in. And I think a lot about that when I think about white supremacy.
Right.
And like the moral injury it causes, you both are so indoctrinated, and yet when you finally come face to face with it, you're like, oh,
I don't like this.
This isn't. But then you're like, but do I lay my weapon down, right? Or do
Right.
I take up
Well,
arms?
the
And
thing
too
about
many people
indoctrination,
continue to take up arms.
yes, the thing about indoctrination is that, like, it will teach you not to trust yourself. So
1000%.
when
I still don't.
no, I get it. Like, me neither. Most of the time, I have to, like, really consider it and think about it and, like, run it past my therapist and talk to people who I trust. Like,
Literally, I wrote this down from my therapist last week. Any amount of self-actualization is going to feel selfish in comparison to what I've been doing. Because I'm literally, like, doing things for myself and
yeah,
choosing myself, and I'm selfish. I'm a monster. I'm a
yeah,
horrible person.
I hear you. I cannot tell you how much I feel that. And I know that a lot of times, at least my probably online persona comes across a lot more a lot more strongly where, like, yeah, I'm confident, I know what I'm doing, like, I have it all figured out, and
Sure.
here's what we're doing. And that's for a lot of different reasons, right? And that's one aspect of myself. Um, but there are many aspects of myself that are still deeply affected by this
Yeah.
indoctrination where I think,
Yep.
like, is this the right thing? Am I focusing on myself too much?
Yeah.
And then you think, well, okay, but I've learned that I should be focusing on myself. But then it's like, who's going to be the arbiter here? Who's the the judge between
Yeah.
the 2 points of, like, what's too much, what's too little?
Right.
And so, yeah, so I think it has, and again, I've talked about this a million times, but part of my deconstruction was struggling and wrestling with this fact that, like, because I grew up in a fairly charismatic church, but I never
Okay.
had these feelings, right? I didn't feel like God loved me. I wasn't speaking in tongues. I wasn't passing
Yeah.
out the Spirit, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And so this idea that, like, I'm not feeling any of these things, but I'm also being taught that, like, your emotions can't be trusted and the heart is deceitful above all things. So, like,
Desperately wicked.
you
Who can
can't,
know it?
exactly. You can't trust it. I'm like, well, who the fuck am I supposed to be trusting then, right? Because, like,
Right.
I'm not feeling anything from God, and I'm not supposed to trust in what I'm feeling. So, like, what does that even mean? And it definitely, the indoctrination effect, or the effect of indoctrination, was very much like, okay, like, I've been taught that if I don't do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to hell. So
Yeah.
even if I don't
That's
feel
terrifying.
comfortable doing X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z, I'm going to do it anyway
going to
because
do
there's
it. Yeah.
incredibly serious eternal consequence if I don't. And that's, this falls very much into with proselytization and mission trips and all these things that, like, I didn't want to go out on the street and, like, tell people about Jesus. That felt incredibly weird and uncomfortable to me. But I was also taught that, like, that was my task. If I didn't do it, I was going to be held accountable. And me feeling uncomfortable was actually, like, a sacrifice to God. So, like, when people tell me now, I feel so guilty about all the things I did as a Christian. Like, I'm not trying to absolve them at all of that guilt, but I am trying to remind them that, like, that compassion that you would extend to someone else, you should also extend to yourself, because you were very much indoctrinated. There was a degree of psychological warfare there, and especially if you grew up in it, that paved your neural pathways.
Yeah,
like,
it sure did.
Anyway, it's...
God bless the MDR is all I have to say.
Yeah. I guess all I'm getting at there, which is my very long-winded way of saying things, is, like, you're out there and you're thinking, or you're ever feeling like such a bad person because you did all of these things as a Christian. You did the best you could with the information you have, and now you have better information and you're trying to do better.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, that's not going to magically absolve you, and there might be amends that you get to make. There might be, and I hope that there is for you, because that's a
thing.
Healing feeling.
Yeah.
But, like, also, you should not be beating yourself up for the rest of eternity because you behaved in a way that you were conditioned to behave. Like, and I will stop there. Sorry.
It's so true. No, it's so true, though. You for so long are told, be colorblind, but also, like, hearing side comments of, like, why is that person speaking Spanish? This is America.
Oh my God, right? And that's
While
even, I
simultaneously,
live,
those people are also signing their kids up for Spanish immersion classes.
right? Yep.
So they
So you
can
can
get
get
a
into a
leg
better
up.
college.
There you go.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I live in the Bay Area. For those of you that don't know, like, I can most days understand most of the Spanish being spoken around me because it's so common here. And that's not a bad thing. That's great. Yeah, I took a couple years in school, but like, to be honest, it's just I hear it all the time. The streets are named after, the stores have these names. Like, it's going on around me all of the time. And even
Immersion's
here,
the best way to learn.
exactly. And even here, I was taught, or things were said to me growing up that were very much like, you know, basically learn to speak English here in America. Like, right, like, why should we have any kind of special anything for people that can't speak English? You know, you want to come here, learn the language. And it's like, y'all really have no concept of what it's like to be in such danger or economic distress that you leave your homeland to go somewhere that you are not wanted,
Right.
and where you will struggle. And so this complete lack of compassion, plus these like thinly veiled racist comments, are just.
Oh, they're not even thinly veiled.
Right now, I was being
They're
generous.
blatant. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you.
Once a week, I try.
There you go.
Okay, sorry. Let's get back to you.
Yeah. No, you're good. It was sort of in the fallout of the election. And then post-election, I started asking a lot of questions that I wasn't supposed to be asking. And through that, had quite a bit of a church trauma occur at the church I was working at. And from there, it was just like, at the very bare minimum, I know I need to be done working at an institution that doesn't believe that women should have the title pastor, even if they are pastoring, right? Which is somewhat of the case in some of those places. And then from there, I had my Old Testament professor reach out and simply say, like, why haven't you thought about academia? Like, why? I loved and still love Hebrew, and I had learned it actually in an intensive course, immersion at Westminster, and it blew my mind. It rocked my world.
I'm also learning Hebrew right now, so I agree. It's fascinating. I love it.
And then I learned Greek, and I was like, Hebrew's still so much cooler. I'm sorry. It is a competition.
Someday
and Hebrew wins.
we can get together and discuss the like pictographic roots of Hebrew, which just like kind of melted my mind when I started learning about them. And I'm by no means an expert, but I was like,
yeah. Half the time though, when people are like the pictographic roots, and my favorite was when I went to go get my hair done, and the dreaded question of, what do you do for a living? And I was like, well,
it's hard to explain, really.
Work in Hebrew Bible. And she was like, oh my God, we carry these cards around that have Hebrew characters on them, and they just give us such immense power. And I'm like, well, if that works for you, great. But like, that's not
what I do. Yeah.
No, not the same, but okay. When you're starting to get into like, well, I read this one word and the numbers spell 666.
Dude, yeah.
Monster energy drinks are from the devil.
Dude, all I can say is that I'm so grateful that my hairstylist is a witch. That's all. Like,
love it.
Love it. And,
here for it. Might need
love
to
you,
see your
Anthony.
hairstylist when I move. Yeah.
Please do. If you're willing to make the trek, guarantee you will not be disappointed.
Not even that much of a trek, so it works out.
It's like 90 minutes, and you can come by. We'll hang out.
Done. Would love to get my hair done by a witch. Yes. 1000%. if my grandma listens to this, she will start to cry and start crying out for my soul, as an FYI.
Yeah, that's fine. I think my mom would probably join her for me. To which I say, lol. Sorry.
It's gone, honey.
Yeah, it's over. It's gone.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So through that process, was introduced to, I didn't know I could attend schools that were not in America.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that they would be affordable.
Yeah. It's wild.
Crazy. School systems in other places haven't figured out.
But we are the greatest country on earth, okay? Please. Please.
We're the greatest. I went to Stellenbosch University in South Africa, and studied under a woman named Juliana Claessens, and she is incredible. She taught me everything I know. But of course, I started my program in 2019, November 2019.
Okay.
And then flew out to South Africa in March 2020.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds cool anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, well, while we were on the flight there, found out that...
Oh, never mind. Less cool. I just remembered. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So I did my whole program distance from here in Michigan, and really just hunkered down and read all the books I wasn't allowed to read. And my mind
exploded.
Has never been the same. Yeah.
Out of curiosity,
I am a heretic.
Listen, Queen of the Heathens, right? It wasn't a name I gave myself. Let me say that.
No.
I know. It's wild, right? I feel like sometimes I email people asking if they want to like come on and chat, and I feel obligated to explain that, like, yes, I am 33. No, I did not give myself that name, but it has stuck and it's not going anywhere. So
No, it's not.
This is what it is.
Love it.
Out of curiosity.
Yeah.
So if the lockdown had never occurred, what would that have looked like sort of long distance? Would you have gone there and stayed for the
opportunity
extent?
was there to stay there for periods of time if I wanted to.
For periods of time, you would go home and come back.
Yeah. Well, technically, I could have stayed there the entire time.
All right. Yeah.
But typically, they like people to be there for at least 6 months. Mm-hmm. But it really is because they want to make sure you have great library access for your program, because you clearly need it. Yeah. And thankfully, the Michigan library system is really wonderful, to be honest. And so I got everything I needed during lockdown. So shout out to Grand Rapids Public Libraries and the Mel system. Thank you.
Y'all real one.
Thank you, libraries. You're my favorite.
Big fan of libraries,
program.
not gonna lie. Yeah, God. Libraries right up there with, like, the roads.
Yeah.
So I guess I realize we've sort of talked not very much about your actual research, so I have a feeling if you're up for it, I will have you back. I would love to have you back, because I feel like I've known you for a long time.
It's wonderful.
I love it. Love it. That all being said, when, you're awesome, but moving on. No.
Great. Fine by me.
How did you decide upon this topic? I guess, so you get into your PhD program, you're like, this is great, I'm gonna PhD the fuck out of this. How do you decide upon this topic?
Well, that's like the first question that they ask you.
Of course.
And I got into my program and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew, like,
I just want to learn.
In the Old Testament Hebrew Bible area, somewhere in there. So
let's do this. Why did you choose the Hebrew Bible? Yeah. Was it just because you loved Hebrew, or like?
Generally, I just think, especially when it comes to the American church, the Old Testament is seen as this, like, horrible bad God. and
Yeah.
New
And it's
Testament
there
is
and you
good
kind of have to
God.
deal with it, but it also doesn't really count.
Right, right.
Yeah.
He gets better, don't worry. And also, I love the Hebrew language, and
Yeah.
so it just made sense to me.
Yeah. I just want to say shout out
Um,
to all my Jewish friends for having to deal with all of the fucking anti-Semitic bullshit that comes with Christianity.
yeah, I
Yeah, it's the worst.
just so much, so much. Yeah, your God is bad, right? But when we
Yeah.
get to the New
But
Testament, he gets better.
the
Because it's still
Father,
the same, right? Right?
right,
He's
they're
still
the same. It's just the Father of my God, but they're also the same, but my God is actually awesome and y'all killed him. Like,
Right,
oh,
right.
all right.
And mine's better. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That does.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's all very complicated and gross.
It's actually not even that complicated. It's just gross.
No, it really is. It is super gross. How much of it is so baked in?
God.
When
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be.
No.
It really doesn't. Anyway, yeah. So chose Hebrew Bible simply because I love it. I love the text. The language is just breathtaking. And I know I'm being a little like, oh my God.
No, I love it.
But I love it. I haven't stopped, which is so great. So I did stop being Christian in seminary, but I am so obsessed. Like, I have not stopped being obsessed with what I research. So that's really great. I'll take it.
And what I've said it a million times, so I consider myself agnostic at this point. I would say I don't think there's a God, but I would never say that I could prove that.
Yeah.
But that actually doesn't matter that much to me. What I do like to tell people is that as an agnostic or an agnostic atheist, or however you want to label that, I find the Bible so much more fascinating and valuable than I ever did when I was a Christian. Ever. And and that's when people ask me why I still talk about it, I'm like, because it's so cool.
It's amazing.
It's just not going to be this fucking standard to which I hold everybody in all of history. Especially when the people that are doing that don't understand, like, I don't know, the language, genres, poetry, like literally
What's so
anything
funny
at all.
about that too is, like, again, that Old Testament, New Testament dichotomy that Christians love to make. When Jewish people, for the most part, are like, yeah, you've got to evolve. Like, we're constantly wrestling with the text.
Yes.
What are you all doing?
Yes, I was talking to my friend last night, and she was saying that, like, and I don't want to mess this up, but there's a story, I believe it's from the Mishnah, forgive me if I'm wrong, which basically says, like, yeah, the text is no longer in heaven, therefore we have to figure out what we're doing with it. Like, okay, we don't, if y'all, I think most of you heard this from the other night, but it's like, okay, this voice from heaven says, yeah, listen to this rabbi, he's saying whatever. And the other rabbis are saying, we don't listen to a voice from heaven because Torah is no longer in heaven. It's here on earth with us. And therefore we have to wrestle with it and we have to figure out what to do with it in the time and place that we are existing.
Yeah.
If I ever join a religion, it will be Judaism, full stop, that's it.
I have actually said that. Yep.
Yeah, like, I don't think that I will, but if I ever do, there's literally only one on the table. Like, that's it.
Yep.
But anyway, sorry. I feel like I've dominated so much of this conversation because I'm just, like, so excited about it.
I love it. I'm here for it. And actually, it's interesting because a lot of people were telling me, like, pick a topic that you know you'll continue to be interested in for a couple of years because you're doing it for a couple of years.
For a couple of years. And then probably, like, the rest of your life after that in some capacity.
Yeah.
You know, PhD.
Yeah, it's sort of a thing. And so at that point, I was just like, I'm just going to write down stuff that I think is interesting. And we'll pick from there. And so I literally, I wanted to be in the prophets more explicitly. I didn't really want to be in Judges and the Deuteronomist history, even though now I think I would want to be more in the D8 than I want to be in the prophets. But I love both. I love all of it. I just do. I know that's super cheesy, but I just do. And I was reading in Hosea because I was kind of hoping to be in Hosea, and in part because I had connections here in Grand Rapids that were close to Hosea and some of that. So I knew I would have help if I
Right.
stayed here. Even though as soon as I pitched my idea to the scholar who knows Hosea, he's like, no, that's not a good idea. And I'm like, well, I think it is. So I'm going to keep going. And here we are.
Love that. I love that.
Yeah. But yeah, in chapters 8, actually in chapters 9 and 10 of Hosea, it mentions like over and over again, the sin of Gibeah, the sin of Gibeah, the sin of Gibeah, 3 times, which is why I said it 3 times. Sorry.
Do you think that's on accident, or do you think it might be like a rhetorical tool? I don't know.
Oh, well, it's in separate verses, so it depends on how you want to take that. But yes, I like it.
Double toil
times.
and trouble.
Biblical
right?
3. And immediately I was like, what's the sin of Gibeah? What's Gibeah? And you do a quick word search of Gibeah, and Judges 19 comes up. And I was like, gang rape and dismemberment. Sign me up. And that's
Sorry.
literally my research topic became, what is the sin of Gibeah? What do we define it as? Because Hosea doesn't define it, but he mentions it. Like, you are committing the sin of Gibeah. Okay, what is that sin?
And how would have Hosea even understood that? I think is a really interesting question.
Exactly.
Because, like, do I think that the treatment of women historically has been objectively wrong? Yes.
Yeah.
However, do I also think that we have to extend some degree of, like, how did these people understand the world?
They weren't feminists.
What were they taught? How were they raised, right? Like, does it make it okay? No,
feminists.
It doesn't. But if we're actually going to try and understand this, we have to, like, take into account how these people existed.
I forget who the quote is referenced to, but it's, we have to ask feminist questions, but we have to be prepared to not receive feminist answers.
Yeah, I mean, how could you? Like, how could you?
It's not.
Yeah. I think that's a very valid thing to say, that we can extend evolved critiques back into time.
Totally.
But we should not expect that the answers we get from antiquity are going to be evolved. That's
They're
what
not.
we evolved from, right?
Yep.
And does it make it okay? Of course not. Just like slavery wasn't okay. But when we talk about slavery, we also are like, yeah, is it okay? No. But should we look at it in the context of, like, what the hell was going on around them? And, like, does that help us better understand what these texts were doing in comparison to, like, the Code of Hammurabi, right? Like, it's that type of thing.
What I don't love about that, though, is I do some editing on the side for certain projects. And people all the time are like, slavery is bad, but biblical slavery wasn't that bad. And I'm like, no, it was still actually bad.
Yeah.
It was
it's because people want to give biblical anything a pass. When nobody would have given a pass to slavery going on in any other, like, people group at that time. I might, like, know a guy who focuses on this. Shout out to Dr. Josh. But, like, yeah, you can, and he does this sometimes, compare, like, the Code of Hammurabi to, like, biblical slavery laws. And you can certainly see the comparison and whatever, but it doesn't make either of them right. And then if you look at, like, Deuteronomy versus the laws in Leviticus, of course you're going to see some evolution. It doesn't make either of them right. It makes one of them better, but it's still not right. It's still not objectively moral, right? And that's a whole other topic. But
oh my gosh.
Anyway, sorry,
really But yeah, very true. Like, do I agree with the fact that ancient authors and even their context would have seen the sin of Gibeah maybe as the woman deserved it?
Probably.
I don't love that answer.
No, of course not.
I need to take into consideration that this is a patriarchal society. They might have seen it just as that.
Yeah. You don't have to like the answer to acknowledge that it might be true. But you
No.
can also stand here in 2022 and say that's still fucked up.
Yeah.
Even if that's what they thought, it's still fucked up. And
Yeah.
we should be critically examining this
Yes.
and sort of speaking on this more with what we understand now,
Yes.
instead of just reading this passage and being like, ah, well, woman deserved it. Like, no, that's an acceptable answer for someone that lived in, like, you know, ancient Israel. And it's acceptable only because that's
Yes.
all any of them knew. But it's not objectively acceptable.
It was acceptable to them. However, it is morally objectionable.
Right. And we now have evolved past that. So it's imperative, it is our duty to then take these passages and say, like, fuck that. Like, no, we know now that's not okay. But it's the same people who will sit there and argue for 5 billion hours about how, like, no, actually owning another human being wasn't, like, wrong because, like, Bible. That will then also be like, no, it's that she deserved it. And it's like, no, you just have, like, this presuppositionalist, like, position where it has to be right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So much
You know,
there.
so much all the time.
So that is how I got to my topic. Is essentially I flipped through and tried to figure out what I liked the most, and did not know what the sin of Gibeah was, and so I sought to find the answer. I
am so glad that you've done this work, and so grateful, because as someone who grew up evangelical, women were not really considered. Like, it did not matter what happened to them in the Bible, right? And if it did, it was in some kind of, like, passing way where, like, yeah, that's terrible, wouldn't do that again. But, like, nobody is really addressing the fact that, one, it did happen. Two, it was considered important enough to be put into a holy text.
There you go.
And three, like, what does that mean, right? It wasn't put in there for the women. It was put in there to, I don't know, teach the men something, show the men something. Like, they were there as a lesson and nothing more.
Yep.
And I know that you address this, and I would love, if you're open to it, and if not, we'll just edit it out, to do, like, maybe more of a live stream where we can have people come in and it'll just be in the chat, but they can sort of ask these questions and you can give a much more educated sort of opinion than I have. But I would love that, because I think everybody I've told about this topic has been like, oh my God, that's so interesting. I want to hear more. And I think from a women's perspective, it's even more valuable and more important and more valid. But I do want to be respectful of your time. So I want to say thank you for being here. Not only was it great to learn from you, I feel like I've made a friend. And I love that.
Close.
I know, finally, someone close to me. So I'm super excited. This is amazing. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your work, even aside from me. Like, I think it's incredibly valuable. And I would love if you could do a couple of things before we wrap.
Yeah.
One would be if you have like 1 to 3 book recommendations for folks that are interested in this topic and want to learn more. Because I'm assuming they can't pre-order your book yet. And then 2, where people can find you, how they can support you, all of those things if you want to be found. I don't force people to be found. Some people don't want it.
Hold on.
No, I'm waiting.
I'm grabbing. Okay. I've got my 2.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be 3. I just give people a range so that they don't feel stifled.
Okay. I've got 2 and 3. I've got 2. I've got 3.
Hey,
3.
I will take whatever you want to give. I just don't want people to feel, when people are like, oh, you could give me 1 to 20. I'm like, guess I got to do 20 because I'm an overachiever.
I would love to give all of the books. We found a like old school vintage book cart, library cart, and that's what I keep like the books I'm currently working on.
I love it. Yeah.
Otherwise, it'd just be...
Yeah.
Anyway.
Have you ever been diagnosed with ADHD? Asking for a friend.
Yes!
Oh my god, same. Okay.
But late in
I feel
life.
it.
Late in life.
Same,
So
like a year
in
ago,
the past,
not even.
Like, yeah. In the past, like, 2 years, I met with a new therapist, and she was like, I'm going to send you a few things, and I just want to know if you identify with them.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
it's
feel like
severely
just...
underdiagnosed in women.
How weird.
Joy.
Yeah, same. Like, when I finally got, like, a nurse practitioner who was also a woman, and I was like, here are my symptoms, she was like, girl.
Honey.
And I was like, nobody told me this before. I've just been fucking raw dogging life, struggling out here, like sorry.
And as soon as I read the stuff, I literally called my mom, and I was like, listen, you have ADHD, Mom.
Hate to break it to you.
She immediately actually, so I cannot afford to get the official diagnostic done because insurance sucks.
Yeah.
But my mom's insurance is great. And so she went and got it done. And they were like, you're over the chart. Like,
I ended up doing telehealth because it costs money. Yes, totally. And I understand that's not something everyone can afford.
Yeah.
So there's no, like, judgment here. I was just fortunate enough to be in a position where, like, I could afford to spend, like, a couple extra $100 to, like, quickly get some assistance.
Yeah. Are you
yeah.
Is it weird to ask, are you medicated then?
I am now. Yeah.
How is that experience?
It's literally the only reason that I've been able to do what I'm doing for the last several weeks. Like, people probably don't know this. You probably don't know this. Since I put up the Calendly link, I have had interviews every single night of the week.
I was going to say, mornings. Like, literally every day.
Every day, and sometimes twice a day, and then on weekends 2 times each day. And it's been awesome. It's been awesome. But there is not a chance on God's green earth that I would have been able to read any of the things that people had sent me to, like, ask decent questions.
Yeah.
And then also stay on task. Like, I wouldn't have even, it wouldn't have happened.
My supervisor kept getting really upset with me because I would, like, be working on my dissertation and then, like, work on 5 other side projects. And then I got diagnosed, and she was like, oh, that makes sense. I was like, yeah, I get bored. I move on to the next thing. And she's like,
yep,
do whatever you need to do.
Yep, it's same. I think, being, like, very honest, so I am on Adderall. I've made no, like, secret of that. There is certainly an adjustment period because it's a stimulant, right? So, like, there's a level that you have to figure out because you can be like, I don't feel anything, and then you can be like, I'm a little spun out. So you have to figure that out. But once you kind of get the balance down, like, it just, like, my brain quieted down a little bit. I wasn't constantly in, like, 57 mental conversations. If there was something that needed, I know, really, nice. That was the number one thing. Like, I remember the first day I took it.
Here.
Yes. The first day I took it, I was like, it's so quiet. And, like, not in a bad way, in a way that's, like, I can actually think
focus
about things. Like, yeah. And yeah, I mean, like anything else, there are, like, some side effects that you have to figure out and make sure that everything's balanced, especially if you're on any other medication. But overall, like, it has made my life so much more manageable. And I was on actually a pretty high level of anti-anxiety medication, and that has dropped off because I can get things done.
I mean, yeah, so, like, most people girls have anxiety and depression when it's just undiagnosed ADHD.
Yes, it's like I'm anxious because I can't get anything done, and I'm frustrated and depressed because I can't get anything done, and it feels like a failure on my part. Like, I'm just not trying hard enough. And again, I'm not trying to say it's a miracle cure. Like, I've had to mess around with some of my levels of things,
for sure.
But, like, it has quieted my brain a bit, and it has allowed me to just actually do things. Like, I think I need to call this whatever, and then I just do it.
Yep.
Because even though I don't really want to, I'm not like unable to. And if you know, you know. Like, if you know, you know.
I like want to bring my partner up here and be like, just tell them what I just said an hour ago.
Yes. I would, this is not an ad. I don't get paid.
No.
I went through Circle Health, and did it cost
What
a
is
couple
it?
$100? Yes, it did. Circle Health. Again, did it cost a couple $100? Yes. Was it worth it? Yes. If the funds
There's
exist.
certain things that are just worth that.
Yeah. And I can send you whatever information. I think you'll be able to use it, especially once you move to California, but you might still be able to use it now, so I'll send it all to you.
Love
Anyway.
it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so
I love that this turned into, do you have ADHD? Because I'm tracking and you're tracking.
Dude, it's like I can pick it up. I'm like, I don't know. When you said library card, I was like, what? ADHD.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But it is. It's that way.
Yeah.
Because like I have 5 billion books back here, and if I don't have the ones out that I'm currently reading and somewhere accessible, they'll never get read. I'll forget they exist. I'll just buy some new books.
Yeah, but I also don't want clutter out because then I can't focus at all. And I already can't focus, so like don't put another roadblock in front of me.
Don't put another roadblock in front of me, self. I fully hear you. And I hope that anyone else that hears this, if this sounds like you,
oh please
if you can, call somebody. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
I know it's not as easily accessible for everyone. So I hope this doesn't sound like, well, just go do it. All I'm saying is if you can do it and this sounds like you, check it out, because your life might get a lot easier.
And even on my end, like I haven't taken meds or anything yet, because I haven't been officially diagnosed. But just knowing has completely changed and helped my functioning in general. Just knowing.
Because you understand, like, oh, this doesn't work, but this other thing might. And also, like, I can have a little compassion with myself because it's not me being a lazy, bad person.
A lot of my self-hatred kind of dissipated at that point.
Oh, my brain just, like, doesn't work the same way as everyone else's. Okay, like, I'm not bad. This is a neurological thing. Like,
I'm not bad.
None of you are bad.
No.
Probably.
Hope not.
Probably not. If you're watching this, you're probably not bad.
Heathen.
Okay. I know,
okay.
Right? Where can all of our fellow heathens find... Oh, no, we didn't even do books yet. Do the books. Then where can we find you? ADHD. Books. Am I right?
I'm following. I'm good. Okay. My first thing... got just an intro book. It's called The Hebrew Bible, Feminist and Intersectional Perspectives. Gail Yee is the editor, and I love me some Gail Yee. And it's really just really basic, simple. I say all that, but it's really good stuff where it's just going to cover differing perspectives from different places and their take on certain portions of the Hebrew Bible. It's really good. But as it pertains specifically to my research, 2 books, and got to take every opportunity to pitch Writing and Reading to Survive by Juliana Clausen, who is my supervisor.
Shout out, Juliana.
My doctor mother. Yes, shout out, Mother Juliana. I'm like, I don't call you Mom, I promise. But she... really is the reason why my dissertation went in the direction it did. Originally, I was just seeking to find what the definition of the sin of Gibeah was. And she was like, well, why don't you try these lenses? And like a good prescription, they worked and completely changed me in general. So thank you. And then last but not least, Text After Terror by Rhiannon Grable.
It's so
can't
good.
Stop talking about this book. Cannot stop talking about it. So get on this is all I have to say.
On it.
Get on it.
All right. If folks want to find you, if they want to support you, if they just want to learn from you, where and how and what is the best way to do that?
Twitter. My at is Alexiana D. Lou. I was going to change it, but it's out there. There it is.
Yeah.
My
and we will link it
pet
in the show
name
notes.
is there. Yes. Yeah, Twitter, Instagram, and that's about it.
Instagram.
Same handle for everything.
Hey, that makes it easy.
I blog. And that is linked on both pages. So you can find me there, but
Awesome.
I'm reworking that too.
And you will have a book coming out?
I will. The monograph is due December 31st this year. So I have some writing to finish up. So I'm hoping that sometime in the next 2 years, I'll have a book out on trauma and speech act theory. So how does trauma affect speech, and how does that affect the interpretations of speech in the biblical corpus? So
I feel like this speaks to my heart. I'm so excited. Please keep us all apprised. I sincerely hope to maintain communication and to have you come chat with us more often.
Please.
So people could learn a lot. I could learn a lot. And also, I just really like you. So,
win-win.
Win-win. So on that note, thank you so much for being here. For all you folks listening, please like, subscribe, do all the things that you do. Go support Alexiana, and let me know what you thought about this episode.
Please.
And on that note, I'll see y'all next time. Bye.